In 1148, the mightiest army Europe had ever assembled gathered together, but not to fight their enemy, to attack their own ally. 30,000 knights from across Europe, 3 of the most powerful kings of the age, and one single target, the ancient city of Damascus. The problem was that Damascus had been allied with Jerusalem for 8 years, fighting together against their common enemy. They were friends, not foes. 4 days after the siege began, it was all over. Not with a glorious victory, but with a humiliating retreat the likes of which had never been seen. They fled back to Jerusalem empty-handed, and the cruelest irony? Their real enemy never even had to lift a finger. So what exactly happened? To understand this story, we need to go back to 1144, when the city of Edessa fell to Muslim forces under the warlord Zengi. The following year, Pope Eugene III issued a papal bull calling all of Christendom to launch the Second Crusade and reclaim the Holy Land. Bernard of Clairvaux, the most influential monk in all of Europe at that time, took it upon himself to convince kings and nobles to join the cause. 2 of the most powerful kings answered the call: Louis VII of France and Conrad III of Germany, the future Holy Roman Emperor. In May of 47, Conrad III departed from Regensburg with 20,000 elite soldiers, the most powerful army Germany had ever fielded. They marched through Anatolia, territory controlled by the Seljuk Turks. And it was here that the first disaster of the Crusade began to unfold. On October 25th, the Battle of Dorylaeum erupted. The Turks ambushed and slaughtered nearly the entire German army Conrad had built. 20,000 soldiers departed. Fewer than 2,000 survived. 9 out of 10 dead before they even reached the enemy they came to fight. Conrad III was badly wounded and had to return to Constantinople to recover. The French army also suffered devastating losses in Anatolia. In early 1148, the remnants of the French and German armies finally reached Jerusalem. Exhausted, but not yet ready to give up. In April, Conrad III arrived in Jerusalem after recovering. He met Baldwin III, the ambitious 18-year-old king of Jerusalem. The original goal was to recapture Edessa. But in Jerusalem, a different idea emerged. One that would change absolutely everything that followed. Baldwin III and the Knights Templar proposed attacking Damascus instead, a city far richer and more important to the Christian world. There was one major problem. Damascus was not the enemy. The city had been allied with Jerusalem since 1140 to fight against Zengi. A great council was summoned at the city of Acre to decide the target. The chronicler William of Tyre called it the most spectacular assembly in history. On June 24th of 48, the Council of Acre convened with all the nobility and military leaders of the Crusader states in attendance. 3 kings were present: Conrad of Germany, Louis of France, and Baldwin of Jerusalem, along with dozens of dukes, barons, and grand knights. There was one young face in the crowd: Frederick of Swabia, Conrad's nephew. 40 years later, he would lead the Third Crusade himself. Baldwin III was just 18 and locked in a power struggle with his own mother, Queen Melisende. He wanted Damascus to prove himself. Some barons warned, Damascus is helping us fight Nur ad-Din. Attacking them is stabbing ourselves in the back, a fatal mistake we will regret. But Conrad and Louis did not care. They needed a glorious victory to bring home to Europe, and Damascus sounded far more impressive than Edessa. The decision was made. Damascus would be attacked despite all objections. And this was the moment when everything began to go terribly wrong. Who would defend Damascus against the mightiest army in Europe? That would be Mu'in ad-Din Unur, the Atabeg and true ruler of the city. Unur had a remarkable past. He had once been a Mamluk, a slave warrior. From slavery, he rose to become the regent of all of Damascus. William of Tyre, the Crusaders' own chronicler, called Unur a man of great wisdom who loved our people. The enemy praised by his own foes, Unur prepared the defense, strengthening the walls, summoning the militia, and sending messengers to the 2 most powerful lords, Nur ad-Din and Saif ad-Din. The Crusader army was estimated at 30 to 50,000 men. Damascus had only about 10,000. They were outnumbered 3 to 5 times. In July, the massive army departed from Tiberias, circled around the Sea of Galilee, and advanced toward Damascus like an unstoppable flood of steel. The plan was to attack from the west, where the famous Ghouta orchards lay. Here there was abundant water, food supplies, and wood for siege engines. On July 24th, a Saturday, the attack began. The Crusaders advanced along the Barada River, pushing through the dense, heavily wooded orchards. The orchards favored the defenders. The paths were narrow, the trees thick, and Damascus soldiers ambushed them everywhere, raining down arrows. Conrad III, though still weak from illness, personally led the assault with sword in hand. William of Tyre called it a memorable feat of arms. By the end of the first day, the Crusaders had taken the western orchards and camped near the Bab al-Jabiyah gate. Everything seemed to be going well. On July 25th, Sunday, Damascus counterattacked fiercely. Fighting raged from dawn until dusk, with heavy casualties on both sides. One remarkable detail: a 71-year-old jurist named Yusuf al-Findalawi took up arms to defend his city and died heroically in battle. Also killed was the Sufi mystic al-Halhi. The entire city of Damascus, from elderly scholars to common people, all took up arms to fight. On July 26th, good news arrived for Damascus. Reinforcements began appearing. Skilled archers from Lebanon and troops from Saif ad-Din in Mosul. Ibn al-Qalanisi, the Damascus chronicler who witnessed the siege firsthand, recorded that the defending forces and weapons had nearly doubled. And more important news, Nur ad-Din and Saif ad-Din had reached Homs, just 150 kilometers away, and were negotiating with Unur. The Crusaders realized the danger. If that relief army arrived in time, they would be trapped between two forces. They had to act fast or retreat. But instead of focusing on a quick assault, internal conflicts exploded. The three kings began arguing bitterly. Who would rule Damascus if captured? Conrad wanted Damascus. Louis wanted it too. Baldwin wanted it most of all. No one would yield, and the arguments dragged on through the night. On July 27th, a crucial decision was made in the War Council. This decision would end the entire campaign once and for all. They decided to move the entire army from the western side to the eastern side of the city. It sounded normal, but it was actually suicide. The west had orchards with abundant water and food. The east was nothing but barren plains, with no water and no food supplies whatsoever. Why did they make such a decision? To this day, no one knows for certain. There were rumors that Unur had secretly bribed some Crusader leaders. William of Tyre added a humorous detail. When the bribe money was later examined, it turned out to be copper-plated with gold, not real gold. But the real reason was probably the deep internal conflicts. No king trusted another king, and no faction wanted another to gain any advantage. The Crusaders moved to the eastern plains. Under the scorching July sun, with no water to drink, the soldiers quickly began to collapse from exhaustion. The local barons from Jerusalem openly refused to continue the siege. They said bluntly, "This campaign no longer makes any sense whatsoever." Bad news arrived. Nur ad-Din had marched from Homs and was advancing rapidly toward Damascus. If they stayed longer, they would be surrounded. There was no other choice. The three kings ordered a full retreat. On July 28th of 48, the siege of Damascus officially ended. Conrad led his troops out first, with the rest following in chaos. This was not an orderly withdrawal, it was closer to a panicked rout. Damascus forces immediately pursued them. Muslim archers fired arrows continuously at the Crusader rearguard throughout the long retreat to Jerusalem. Nearly 2 years of preparation, marching thousands of kilometers, losing over 90% of troops along the way. Total failure in just 4 days. The Crusaders returned to Jerusalem, utterly exhausted, carrying a shame that could never be washed away. No one could look anyone in the eye. And as with every failure in history, the factions began blaming each other. Conrad blamed Louis, Louis blamed Baldwin. An endless cycle of blame. A plan to attack Ascalon was proposed to salvage some honor, but Conrad refused because he no longer trusted the people of Jerusalem. Plan cancelled. On September 8th of 48, Conrad III boarded a ship at Acre to return to Europe empty-handed and humiliated. He never came back. The chronicler William of Tyre wrote, "A company of kings and princes such as we have not read of through all the ages had gathered in the Holy Land, and for our sins all were forced to return covered with shame and disgrace, with their sacred mission left entirely unfulfilled." In April of 49, Louis VII also departed from the Holy Land, and Eleanor of Aquitaine would divorce him soon after this disaster. Henry of Huntingdon summarized the entire Second Crusade with just one number in his chronicle, 48, a disaster that needed no explanation. Bernard of Clairvaux, who had called for the crusade, lost all credibility. He tried to organize a new campaign, but no one believed him anymore. The Second Crusade ended, having achieved nothing. Edessa remained lost. Damascus still stood strong. But the real story was not over yet. They attacked Damascus to prevent Nur ad-Din from taking it. So what was the actual result? Let us look at what happened in the years that followed. In August of 49, Mu'in ad-Din Unur, the hero who saved Damascus from the Crusaders, died from illness. The city lost its protector. After the failed siege, Damascus completely lost faith in the Crusaders. They no longer saw Jerusalem as an ally and began turning toward Aleppo. In 1154, 6 years after the siege, Damascus fell to Nur ad-Din without a fight. Exactly what they had tried to prevent. Under Nur, ad-Din served a young and talented general. This man would inherit his entire empire. His name was Saladin, the one who made history. In 1174, after Nur ad-Din died, Saladin took Damascus. The city became the center of power for his growing empire. In 1187, Saladin crushed the Crusaders at the Battle of Hattin, and immediately after, he marched on and captured Jerusalem. They attacked Damascus in 48 to stop their enemy from growing stronger. 39 years later, Damascus struck back and took Jerusalem, betraying an ally. Unresolved internal conflicts, fatal decision-making errors. This is a historical lesson in how to destroy yourself completely. And what was the only thing the mighty Crusader army brought back from Damascus? A flower. The Damascus rose carried home by the night debris.